The Tampa Bay area has approximately the third largest deaf and hard of hearing population in the nation and the sixth largest in the world. That means the chances of you running into a deaf individual in your personal or professional life and the need for sign language is more prevalent than you think. We'll introduce you to the Service Source Interpreting and Deaf Services program next on Bayside. Good morning and welcome to Bayside. I'm your host, Shelley Sanders. We are talking all about Service Source, interpreting and deaf services right here, just like I told you before, and we can't do that without talking to Miss Autumn Samuels. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You know, it really is a pleasure to have you here and enlighten us on everything that you do here in the Bay Area and then some. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
So, talk to me a little bit about Service Source. Exactly, you know, I alluded to it, I talked about it. First of all, just the staggering statistic that we here in the Tampa Bay area hold is shocking in and of itself. I had no idea in the nation we are the third largest population of deaf and hard of hearing individuals. That's incredible. Sixth in the world, that's crazy.
It really is. Yeah, there are quite a few deaf and hard of hearing individuals here in the Bay Area. I myself, even just coming up and learning sign language, didn't really realize it until I got more active in the deaf community and doing things around the city. I said, wow, you know, there's so many individuals, and even being involved in this for 9-10 years now, there's still more deaf and hard of hearing individuals that I meet on, you know, a weekly basis. So it's a vast amount.
Yes. So I want to get back to that, but beforehand, let's back up a little bit and talk about really what it is that you do here and how that affects our community.
Sure. So Service Source has a few different departments that serve that specific community. We have our Deaf Services Department, which has an array of different services we provide. And then we also have a freelance interpreting agency where we provide sign language interpreting services to anywhere from a yoga class, a medical appointment, really anything that we as hearing people would go to, deaf individuals go to as well. So they would need communication and need that interpreter.
Right. Well, first thing that comes to mind is usually something television related when I see it, or at sporting events. A lot of times you'll see, but you don't always first think of just everyday issues,
right.
Everyday things that we go to and we take for granted our hearing, honestly. So you provide those services for anybody that needs them, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And you're also a resource center for individuals?
Correct. So in our Deaf Services Department, we provide things that are sort of just walk-in appointment, case-by-case basis. Anybody that's needing maybe help with a resume and tweaking it so that they can apply for jobs. Maybe an individual is trying to navigate through getting an interpreter for an appointment, and maybe they called up the doctor's office and the doctor's office is not aware of how to utilize an interpreter or even hire an agency. So we do provide advocacy to help explain what deaf individuals' rights are if maybe they are not being heard themselves. We allow people to come in the office, open door policy, anything they need, and if it's not something that we can help them with specifically, we have other resources that we can refer to them to.
Perfect. Since you brought it up, let's talk about it. What are those rights? I know the Americans with Disabilities Act covers many different individuals and types of disabilities, but what are the rights of individuals that maybe those that got a job and or if something happened, they were hearing before and now they're not, and now they still have the same job. Where do you go from there? And then what are the rights under that?
So you are correct. The Americans with Disabilities Act, I believe it was established back in 1992, so it's still fairly new. That being said, a lot of people are not aware of what those rights are, specifically pertaining to deaf and hard of hearing individuals. the general deaf community typically does not prefer to be identified as disabled. But as far as here in America, it does fall under a disability that is protected, meaning they have that right to equal access to communication, to the same things that we are able to access, just like any other person that might be blind or in a wheelchair, things like that. We want to make sure that everyone has that equal access. Now, for them to have equal access to communication, that would mean the sign language interpreter or whatever services they feel are necessary for that equivalent. So under the Americans with Disabilities Act, that means companies are therefore supposed to be providing that service for the deaf individual, whether that be their employer, a medical appointment, like anything that you can really think of.
Sure. So they are responsible for providing that. Are they also responsible for paying for that service?
Yes. So the deaf individual is never responsible for finding the interpreter, for paying for those services, anything. That's completely covered. Now it is on the responsibility of the company that they are going to visit. Again, using, say, a doctor's appointment as an example, the doctor's office would be responsible for finding the interpreting agency and setting up the contract and then paying for those services. Now, those services are something you can work out with insurance companies. A lot of times they'll reimburse for it for the companies. It just sort of depends on the specific situation, but under the ADA, yes, that is a requirement that they provide that service for the deaf individual.
Wow. How do you even go about finding that? Is this where ServiceSource comes into play?
Yes. Again, we do provide that service for interpreting, but we also help advocate for individuals that are looking for those type of services, whether that might be a hearing person, a doctor's office that calls me up and says, we Googled you and we found that you're a deaf services department and we need an interpreter. What do we do? And our biggest thing is that we just want to make sure that that specific population is served with what they need and what they're required to have. So at minimum, we just want to make sure that they know where to go. You can, like I said, do a Google search. A lot of times you'll pull up all kinds of different interpreting agencies for that specific area that you're looking for. We do assist with providing those services as well. Many times the deaf individual has used several different interpreting agencies or our interpreting agency in the past. We have business cards, of course, and we hand them out to people in the community. So a lot of times the deaf person will say, oh, here you go. This is the interpreting agency that I like to use. Can you please contact them? And they'll contact us that way.
Sure. Now we're talking about, earlier we were talking about here in the Tampa Bay area being the third largest in the country, the sixth in the world. Okay, why is that?
And I'm not exactly sure. The numbers are always changing, but as far as the Tampa Bay area itself, we have a very large population of deaf. I think it's partly because it's Florida, it's close to the beach, it's a lovely area to live in. It also just sort of has to do with the different areas around the states are more concentrated or less concentrated depending on what resources are available. Florida tends to be one of the states that does have an array of different resources. We are what they call deaf friendly in a lot of ways here in this community. Other locations might have a deaf university that brings in a lot of deaf to that area, or they might just have, again, a different type of resource that we may or may not be able to provide. So that's part of the reason why we're such a large community here.
Fantastic. Now, if you would like more information on what we're talking about here, well, we'll absolutely have this website up for you to be able to access. It's servicesource.org. That website right there is going to give you all the information that Autumn and I are talking about and then some. And if you need their services, by all means, I encourage you to check it out. As a matter of fact, why don't you do that while we go to break? Welcome back to Bayside. I'm your host, Shelley Sanders. We have been talking with Autumn Samuels, and she is the program manager for interpreting and deaf services there at ServiceSource. And you've brought with you a friend, Autumn, Miss Tammy Liu. Welcome to the show, Tammy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
I'm so happy she's here. Very happy you're here. Want to ask you if you've been deaf your whole life, or if this was an incident that happened, or just your background, a little bit about your background.
So I was born deaf. When my mom was pregnant, she had the German measles, so that's how I'm deaf.
Wow. So this is something you've been coping with your whole life. This is how you know. This is how you communicate.
Well, as far as communication, at home, I never really learned sign language. I was put into speech therapy, learned how to speak the best that I could. I also have a deaf brother.
Oh, wow.
But for a different reason. He was born and he for 2 days, he had some breathing issues and he had turned purple, and so.
Goodness.
Yeah,
Goodness.
it made him deaf. So really, both of us, our primary language is American Sign Language.
It's sort of bittersweet, though. You have almost like a partner your whole life.
Yep, that's true. Yeah, and at home, we never really signed at all, but we were kind of forbidden to learn sign in school as well.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of through our youth. We didn't have that as much. We were put into different schools. Also, he was put into a deaf residential school, and then I was mainstreamed with hearing kids.
So how long have you been signing?
Really, since both of us were babies, we kind of just gestured. I guess you could kind of call it home signs. Then we started learning sign language formally through friends, and then my brother, because he went to the deaf school, he learned formal sign language, and he'd come home and I kind of picked it up from him, and that's sort of how it's been.
Sure. Now, as it relates to communication issues that the hearing, us that hear, can't really understand, I think a misconception is when it comes to, say, for example, television. What's the difference? Why do we need closed captioning versus an interpreter? From your experience, I'd love to know.
Really, I would prefer to have an interpreter. The reason for that, the closed captions, they're not always available, first of all. And not all deaf people understand English on that type of level. And that sign language interpreter would be able to provide the direct communication that all of us could understand.
Sure. I never really thought about it from English speaking versus Spanish speaking. So sign language is universal?
No, actually it's not.
Oh, wow.
This specific language is just for America, American Sign Language. Now, most of the world, they have different types of sign language. And it's nice because being deaf to another deaf, we can obviously gesture and communicate much better, but it is a different language.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you being here and sharing a little bit of your perspective and a little of your story as well. Is there something that you would like for our viewers to know, something that could enlighten us to make life maybe even easier or more normal? What is something that maybe a common misconception that the hearing take for granted that could help you out or that could benefit?
Often people that are hearing, they're not really willing to communicate with us. They don't really try. So if you just give it a try and be patient, something like that, you know, we're just alike. We're people just like you. We just can't hear, and that's all.
Very well said. We could all use patience. Isn't that a lesson for all of us? I'll use a little bit of patience just in general. All right, if you at home would like more information, perhaps you know someone or you yourself could benefit from their services, the website is servicesource.org, servicesource.org. All the information that we're talking about today will be there on that website. And of course, we'll have a link for you on our website, cw44.com. In the meantime, we're going to take a short break, but don't go anywhere. We got lots more to talk about. Welcome back to Bayside. I'm your host, Shelly Sanders. We've been talking with Autumn Samuels all about interpreting and deaf services, and of course with ServiceSource. ServiceSource, you guys do so many things, wonderful things here in the Bay Area. Can you just talk about that just a little bit, just what all that encompasses? Maybe we've got people that have just moved here, haven't heard of ServiceSource before.
Sure.
Never know.
ServiceSource has an array of different services and departments that we provide. Again, we've been talking a little bit about the deaf and interpreting services, but we also have services for all different individuals with different types of disabilities. We try and help out in the community with our Warrior Bridge program and different things that serve our veterans. We have other programs for housing, for affordable housing. Several different services we provide to help out all over the Tampa Bay area.
Right. Frankly, we would need about, I don't know, 6 shows back to back, no commercial breaks to talk about it all.
Yes.
So many things.
We are very active kind of everywhere. You'll see our name kind of a little bit in everything.
Sure. But it's all wonderful things they're doing here in the Bay Area.
Yes.
That is a subtle hint for you, which I'm usually pretty, a little more direct for you. But if you're looking to volunteer, or of course, you've got some kind of donations, I'm sure they would love to hear from you. So I'll give you that information a little bit later and keep talking to you about that. But I want to get back to what we were talking about beforehand. And it was so nice to meet Tammy and really get her perspective. And I loved how she said what she did about her advice to people is just be patient and hey, we're just like you.
Yes,
we just
absolutely.
we just can't hear. So, you know, don't stop walking circles around or not be afraid to talk to them. They're just like us, right?
Yeah, and that goes for people that don't know sign language even. Just waving, saying hello,
Right.
shaking a hand. If you want to be able to write back and forth or something, just to show that you care and just show compassion, just like you would with any other individual. Just see it as a different language.
Exactly. So is it considered an official language, since we're talking about it? Is it its own language?
It is. So American Sign Language has been recognized as its own official language. So if you were to go to college and take an ASL class, you actually would get the foreign language credits for it. It is an official language, and it is not the same as English. I think that's one of the biggest assumptions, is that it's just English on the hands. And it does have its own grammar, its own syntax, its own structure, as you would say.
Sure. It's fascinating, really, just to watch and hear how far it's come. You know, where it's come from to where it is now, and just it's exciting, really and truly, just to know that finally things are being recognized. You know, for example, the language is recognized as credits. It's its own official language. You know, steps are in the right direction.
Yes, going from something where they were forbidden to sign in school, as Tammy was mentioning earlier, to having people advocating for the language and advocating for the deaf community, and to be able to preserve that beautiful language is such a huge thing. So
Absolutely.
to recognize it as its own entity and not something that's just a bridge from sign language or a bridge from English.
Correct.
It's huge.
Let's talk about your services that you provide, the deaf services you provide. What kind of fees are involved, if there are any? How does this work?
So there currently are no fee for service as far as the deaf services go. It is a kind of first come, first serve, a walk-in basis. And again, if we're able to help, we're happy to do it. And if we can't, then we'll try our best to find a resource to be able to refer out.
Perfect. So again, if you at home, if you're looking for services, if you know someone that could benefit from these services, by all means, log on to their website, servicesource.org. You'll be able to maneuver around the website and find exactly what you're looking for. All the information and then some is on this website that we've talked about today. It's a beautiful thing what they're doing here in the Tampa Bay area. Again, servicesource.org. We'll have a link for you on our website, cw44.com, as well, in case you get lost. Don't worry, we're coming back right after this. I want to thank you at home for joining us this week on Bayside. And of course, Autumn, thank you so much for being here. And thank Tammy for being here and sharing her story with us. And
Happy to be here.
Just keep doing what you're doing. For you at home, I encourage you week after week to get out, get involved in your community. I can't think of a better program to get involved with. Servicesource.org, that's the website that you're going to log on to. We'll have a link for you on cw44.com as well. We'll see you next week.